Murdered by one's own brother, eaten alive by the desert, torn apart by a leopard, mass murdered by warmongers. Disney's major villains aren't the only ones who suffer gruesome fates. Today we're ranking all the other Disney deaths from gruesome to most gruesome. We'll start with the characters who have the least undesirable ends of today's discussion, which of course refers to the characters who were able to be revived, aka the temporary deaths. Undoubtedly the least gruesome of the bunch was that of Olaf. Okay, first and foremost, come on. Did anyone really think that Olaf, the happy poster child of the Frozen franchise, was gonna stay dead? When Elsa was frozen in the sequel, her magic was temporarily rendered null and void, and this sadly included the magic that brought Olaf to life. But Olaf doesn't melt or have a stroke or anything, he just calmly turns into a lifeless snowman and on his arms, seemingly barely even worried about what's going on.
I've got you.
Oh, that's good.
Even Olaf knew he was gonna come back eventually, and thankfully, he was right, because if he wasn't, I'm sure there would be rioting outside of Disney to this day. Up next, we have a contender for the most aggravating voice in Disney history, Gurgi from The Black Cauldron. But a slightly annoying voice isn't enough to keep us from respecting the guy.
Oh, poor miserable Gurgi deserves fierce smackings and whackings on his
After the crime of not wanting to go into Satan's castle full of demons earlier in the movie, little Gurgi redeems himself for his cowardice, or as I like to call it, his not wanting to die-is, by offering himself to the cauldron in an attempt to neutralize its power, keeping the Horned King's undead army from taking over the world. Given how Gurgi's corpse is able to be retrieved without a lot of visible damage, it's safe to say that his death was probably a pretty swift one, not to mention the fact that the main group is able to revive him in exchange for the cauldron. Still kinda wish they did something about that voice though. Nearing the end of this section is Megara, Hercules' one true love. Falling for a god must not be easy, but when they've temporarily lost their immortality, that just complicates things even further. It makes sense that Hercules wouldn't be too worried about getting crushed by a pillar, being used to super strength and all, but still, that would have smushed him like a bug. This means that Megara's sacrifice to push him out of the way was noble indeed, leading her to a pretty painful death, albeit one that didn't stop her from passing with a smile on her face as she thought of the love she'd managed to save.
People always do crazy things.
Thankfully, Hercules returned the favor later on and put his soul on the line to save Megs from the river Styx, which ended up giving him that godhood he'd been searching for. Oh, and also saving Meg. That's about as pleasant as getting crushed to death can turn out. For our final, non-final death, we have Stitch from Lilo and Stitch 2. This one might be a bit surprising to some of you, since this was a straight-to-DVD sequel, but that didn't stop it from having one of the most gut-wrenching death scenes in Disney history. After Stitch spends nearly the whole movie dealing with flashbacks and instability because of how destructive he used to be, he finally decides the best course of action is to leave the planet so he won't risk hurting his Ohana.
Stitch?
No, Lilo, you're dangerous.
Unfortunately, Stitch didn't have the foresight to get a designated driver for himself, and as a result, he has a glitch during the drive, crashing his ship onto an island and dying in the process. That's dark, man. If it weren't for this being a Disney movie, this could have easily ended up as one of the most morbid death scenes in animated cinema history. As cheesy as it is for Stitch to be revived by the literal power of friendship, we'll let it slide just this once. Because, well, Lilo wasn't the only one sobbing in that scene, we'll put it that way. Oh no, not me. Pleakley was crying like a baby. He told me himself. Ask him if you don't believe me. Speaking of tears, this next section is a category a little closer to home than those who got raised from the dead. These deaths were from natural causes. Kicking off this category, we have Grandma Tala from Moana. It's almost like there's an unspoken rule about parental figures in Disney movies. If one isn't dead before the start of the movie, you can bet they're probably gonna get killed during it. Moana doesn't waste the viewers' time by showing how deep the connection between Moana and her grandma is. She's the only one who really understands her desire to see the ocean, revealing the truth of her ancestors being wayfinders and giving her the courage to follow in their footsteps. Unfortunately, Grandma passes away from an unknown illness fairly early on, but not before encouraging Moana to do her thing and return the heart of Tafiti to its rightful place.
I was there that day. The ocean chose you.
She does do it before getting reincarnated as her chosen sea creature and giving her some more advice at her lowest point though. Man, that's a good grandparent right there. Even death can't stop her from being supportive. Next up we have, wait, she was the only one in that category. Okay, alright then. I guess we'll move on to the quick and relatively painless deaths. Although he was a pretty minor character, Pocahontas' chosen suitor, Kocoum, got a pretty unforgettable ending. When he sees Pocahontas and John together, he quickly rushes in to rescue his would-be wifey, mistakenly sensing she's in danger, but indirectly proving that he wouldn't make a bad partner. Unfortunately, this isn't the last misunderstanding, as poor Thomas gets the idea that John is being savagely attacked and desperately shoots the savage in question to save his buddy. It's a truly sad scene. Even if John taking the blame for Thomas was genuinely touching, Kokum was a decent guy and definitely didn't deserve to go out like that. But at least his death seemed to be instantaneous, so there wasn't much suffering to speak of. The same can be said for Kristijan, leader of the apes and finally the adoptive dad of Tarzan. It sucks that it took him so long to accept Tarzan as part of the family, but in the end, like literally in the end of his life, Kristijan was able to find the courage to take a bullet for Tarzan. He proves that he's learned to truly respect him as one of their own, to the point where he's willing to pass down leadership to him in his dying moments.
My son.
While he did choose to sacrifice himself, unlike Kokum, we still place him a little lower because he was alive for a bit longer after being shot, which I highly doubt felt pleasant. Alright, we all knew this one was coming. Let's talk about Bambi's mother. What seems like sport or even just food shopping to a hunter is absolute terror to an animal. Bambi and his mom found this out the hard way. When a terrifying creature known only as man comes to the peaceful snowy forest, Bambi and his mom run away. Until a single gunshot can be heard in the background, resulting in the death of Bambi's mother. This death was probably the most instantaneous so far, but Bambi's mother has one unique attribute so far. She tried to flee, and had a child to protect on top of that. She did her job as a mother deer, but dear lord, this one was hard to stomach. From one parental death to another, two, actually. Next we have Lilo and Nani's parents from Lilo and Stitch. We don't know much of anything about these two, save for the fact that they died in a tragic car crash, leaving a teenage Nani to raise her toddler sister on her own.
It was rainy, and they went for a drive.
It's a death that's brutal, not just by the means of the death they suffered, but by what they left behind, because this Ohana did not have it easy. Still, they did get to send their kids a guardian angel in Stitch, a very non-traditional guardian angel, but still. It's always sad when the dog dies, even if the dog in question happens to be a henchman, like Roscoe and DeSoto. Bill Sykes' dogs from Oliver and Company are far from the nicest doggies around. They're more than happy to kill and eat smaller pets, and if they hesitate, you can bet it's out of fear of their master, not the goodness of their hearts.
Forget it, DeSoto. We gotta go.
I like cats. I like to eat them.
Still, they are dogs, so when their pursuit of Oliver, Dodger, and the gang results in them being literally electrocuted to death on train tracks, you can't help but feel a bit sorry for them. And rounding out this category, we've got one last pair of henchmen, or hench-eels rather. Flotsam and Jetsam might have sorta had it coming for helping spy on Ariel and carry out their mama's misdeeds, but Ursula's babies were just following their orders. That does tell you that Ursula cared enough about these two to have them help her with important jobs willingly, even if she'd yell now and then. So when Ursula accidentally turned them to stone by using that trident,
Babies, my poor little poopsies.
their instantaneous death is made a lot darker by one simple factor. Ursula just straight up killed her own pets, who she often referred to as her babies.
Pathetic.
That's genuinely sad, to the point where even Ursula, evil though she was, had herself moved to tears. But if it's any consolation, Ursula, you earned yourself a way worse fate, so I'm sure there won't be any hard feelings on the other side. Say hi to Facilier for me, by the way. Okay, now it's time to get serious. These guys suffered a little more than a quick and easy death. They had some painful demises. First up, we have a death that ultimately resulted in a miracle. Pedro from Encanto is one of the many on today's list who chose to lay down his life in order to protect his loved ones. When a corrupt group of soldiers chased his family from their homes, he allowed his wife and child time to escape by surrendering himself. He could only hope that those soldiers might just have enough humanity to talk things out, but unfortunately, Abuela's magical candle told a different story. Still, while Pedro went out, he went out on his own terms, and like a hero at that. Door 15, also known as Doris from Meet the Robinsons, was a tough one to place. On one hand, Doris is undoubtedly a pure evil antagonist. She's a robot bent on ridding the planet of humankind and reshaping the world in her own twisted image. On top of that, she doesn't have any emotions or anything, so we can't honestly say that any means of taking her down wouldn't be justified. On the other hand, though, the way she gets defeated is pretty darn brutal. Doris is taken down by sheer willpower. Lewis, who would eventually both invent her and keep her under wraps for fear of what would happen if she were to be unleashed, is warned of the dangers and straight up decides, yeah, no, I'm just not going to make you.
Why did I ever invent that stupid hat?
Resultantly, Doris fades from existence for good, saving the world from being taken over by hostile artificial intelligence. For now, that is. When you wish upon a star, you might want to keep in mind that you're possibly wishing on Ray's corpse. Not to destroy the magic or anything, but the guy did get stepped on by Dr. Facilier. Being a bug, that's basically the equivalent of being crushed by a giant, like a Bigger Boot from the SpongeBob movie. What makes this one justified as being so low is that, like Dennis from that scene, Ray somehow survives this, only dying later once he has the chance to say goodbye to his friends. If nothing else, he's allowed to reunite with his wife in the sky, which was a very sweet moment and just enough to distract my brain from the tremendous pain this poor guy must have been experiencing. Tadashi Yamada is up next, but
That was his mistake.
what the? Yokai, get out of the writer's room! You're supposed to be in jail! Now then, Tadashi, like many before him, laid down his life to protect his loved ones. Except in this case, it wasn't even a family member or a friend, it was a professor he looked up to.
Callahan's in there. Someone has to help.
But despite Callahan having the means to save both Tadashi and himself from the exploding building, not to mention everyone in there, he decided to just protect himself because, good question, actually. Dude was just a self-centered jerk, and no amount of trauma justifies letting an absolute king like Tadashi die in a fiery explosion. Poor guy. We've talked about Bambi's mom, so now it's time to talk about the other parent who's sure to come up in Disney death discourse, Mufasa. If you're a Disney fan on any level, you probably know this one like the back of your hand, but just in case you forgot, Mufasa died during a desperate attempt to rescue Simba from a stampede of wildebeests. Thankfully, he's successful in this regard, though not without taking a few hits along the way. So naturally, he rushes up to the canyon to get back to safety, only for his brother to absolutely betray him, sinking his claws into him and throwing him to his death.
Long live the king.
While it's possible that Mufasa died on impact, it's more likely that he suffered a great deal of hits from the stampeding wildebeests, not to mention the emotional blow of being betrayed by his own brother. From one villain's betrayal to another, next we have Fidget from The Great Mouse Detective. Ratigan is honestly one of my favorite Disney villains. It helps that he's from a super underrated movie, but the guy is just so delightfully awful. Like, there isn't a shred of redemption in him, as evidenced by the fact that Fidget, his most loyal and trusted ally by far, wasn't safe from his treachery.
No problem.
He's one of many friends who Ratigan attempts to feed to his pet cat Felicia throughout the movie, and when he miraculously survives that, Fidget is still forced into serving his master. In the end, he meets his demise when he tells Ratigan that he needs to lighten the load of their flying machine during that final chase sequence, a sentiment Ratigan agrees with, and resultantly tosses Fidget off to his doom. It's treacherous, it's fatal, given that Fidget is disabled, and if the impact of the water doesn't kill him instantly, he'd certainly die an even more painful death from drowning. Yeah, 80s Disney was something else. But hey, they didn't lose all their edge in the turn of the century. Sitka from Brother Bear is up next. It's hard enough that Sitka had to fight off a grizzly bear to save his impulsive little brother, but when it comes down to it, he chooses not to kill the beast directly. Rather, he decides the best course of action is to create a perfect diversion. By crushing the icy glacier beneath their feet, he creates a landslide that sends the bear away from his brothers and tragically sends himself to his death. Sitka. This is one of those deaths that's made even darker by the sheer lack of clarity. Was he crushed? Did he drown in the frozen water? Was it a simple splat on the ice? It's anyone's guess, but all we know is that Sitka, unlike that glacier, was a guy who wouldn't let you down. Seriously though, screw you, Glacier. You know what you did. Just like the ocean knows what it did to King Agnar and Queen Iduna from Frozen. Ignoring for now how many theories there are about these two secretly surviving, all we know for sure is that Anna and Elsa's parents tragically died in an overseas voyage. When their ship sank, they would have certainly died a pretty terrifying death, and undoubtedly tried to escape. The absolute nicest way they could have met their end at this point would be by drowning, and that's not even taking into account the sheer terror and dread they must have felt. But even these ends pale in comparison to the remaining few. With that, we've reached the characters with the most unspeakable ends of the day. These last few characters possess the downright disturbing deaths. Felicia from The Great Mouse Detective might seem like an odd choice. What looks like a regular cat to us is to mice the horrifying pet of Professor Ratigan, which by proxy means she's basically the equivalent of a pet dragon who eats whomever Ratigan tells her to.
My precious, my baby. Did Daddy's little honey bun enjoy her tasty treat?
She is quite loyal to her credit, and in the final act of the movie, her loyalty extends to chasing down Toby and the mice to keep them from foiling her master's plan. Unfortunately for her, the chase quickly turns into an escape. When Felicia thinks she's outsmarted Toby, who truly is the most brilliant character in cinematic history, she ends up proving herself both wrong and illiterate when it turns out that she just jumped right into the territory of some vicious guard dogs, making it likely that she just got mauled to death and even lost that pretty bow in the process. I know she was a monster to the mice, but having a cat get mauled to death was still pretty wild by Disney standards. At number 5, we have the early movie deaths of Tarzan's parents. While they manage to successfully save their baby boy, these two face a tragic end at the hands, or claws and fangs, that is, of Sabor. Oh, I get it, Sabor, like saber, like a saber-tooth tiger. That's clever because he has sharp teeth. And it also makes the death even more disturbing. I'll do you one worse though. Did you know you can actually see their corpses in the background of one scene? Yeah, have fun with that info. Next, we move to the funeral bells of Notre Dame to talk about Quasimodo's mother from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. While the means of her death weren't as gruesome as some others on our list, she earns herself a high spot on the list for the sheer fact that she died while desperately seeking help from the one place she thought she could find it, the church. After narrowly escaping French law enforcement, she's pursued by Judge Frollo, who, believing she has stolen goods on her, decides to snatch them from her, killing her in the process via a fall down the stairs and a pretty brutal blow to the back of her head. As instantaneous as it was, she died after just having her baby snatched away from her, having to watch in her final moments as she fell further away from Frollo, who would raise her son like a captive animal for the next couple of decades.
A monster.
It's brutal stuff, but if nothing else, this was one of the less physically painful deaths, and we can't say that for these last three. The Bronze Medal of Brutality goes to Gazim from Aladdin. Tasked with entering the Cave of Wonders on Jafar's behalf, he's one of presumably many Fall Guys who's been killed while taking on the task. Unfortunately for this small-time thief, the Cave of Wonders didn't find him to be suitable for anything but a quick snack, and as a result, after giving him just a sliver of false hope, it quickly swallowed him up. Unless caves have digestive systems that I just don't know about, it's anyone's guess as to how this thing disposed of Gazim, but judging by his screams of primal terror, it's safe to say it wasn't pretty. But while his was certainly brutal, Bartholomew from The Great Mouse Detective has one that's even less up for debate. For a movie that's basically just a mouse version of Sherlock Holmes, there sure are quite a few brutal deaths here, and Bartholomew's is the toughest to stomach of all. During Radigan's villain song, which admittedly is pretty snazzy, Bartholomew makes the mistake of calling him a rat. An easy mistake to make given his name, right? Unfortunately, easy mistakes are not tolerated by Radigan, and this drunken mouse is made the next treat for Felicia.
You know what happens when someone upsets me.
This scene does a great job of setting up Radigan as one of Disney's most despicable villains yet, and it's made more brutal by the reactions of those around him. Radigan's other lackeys beg for their friend's life, showing that some professionals have standards, dang it, but Radigan is unmoved, using Bartholomew as an example of what will happen to those who disappoint him, being swallowed whole by a gigantic animal and digested, while in a state where he clearly has no clue what's going on. It's brutal, man. But if we're going to talk about Disney scenes that are genuinely hard to watch, if you ask us, there's only one that can take the cake. General Lee and The Village take home the gold medal of brutality, and honestly, it isn't even close. I mean, the way Shan Yu tracks this village down is messed up. He finds a little girl's doll, studies the fibers and hairs attached to it, and deduces where the village it came from must be, sickeningly joking that he wants to return the girl's missing doll.
Besides, the little girl will be missing her doll. We should return it to her.
Considering the fact that we later see that same doll on the ground next to a completely and utterly decimated village, it's safe to say his intentions weren't so pure. The Huns tore up this village and left no survivors, meaning that they went out of their way to kill every last man, woman, and child there, not just soldiers. Seeing Li Shang honor his father's death by placing his helmet and sword in the ground is hard enough, but seeing the little girl's doll placed right next to it is just... I don't think there's any other Disney scene that brings such a potent feeling of despair and tragedy. It's one thing to see villains be betrayed, or heroes make noble sacrifices, but even aside from the heroic soldiers like Li Shang, this village was full of just regular people, man. Not heroes, not villains, just people. Men, women, kids, and their little button-eyed dolls. If Shan Yu had any shot at humanization before this, it was all wiped away along with that village, making this the darkest fate any non-main villain Disney character has ever suffered by a landslide.